So with the announcement of the Cata pre-patch coming April 30th, as well as the launch date on May 20th, along with this roadmap showing us the major content patches coming during Cata Classic, I just want to take a minute to make a video regarding my feelings on Cata Classic, my intentions on playing it, and just kind of addressing some of the known points for why people aren't going to play it or why they aren't interested in it. Just kind of providing a little bit of feedback for why I will be playing it in light of those points. So there are kind of two major camps as far as why people aren't going to be playing Kata. The first being storyline focused. Obviously, Wrath Lich King is the conclusion of the big climactic fight against the Lich King from Warcraft 3, kind of the conclusion of Arthas' storyline, and really the ending of the storyline created through the Warcraft games. Unfortunately, Cataclysm isn't going to have a as climatic a story. It doesn't have the foundation that Wrath Lich King had, that really TBC even had, and Classic had for trying to engage you in those stories. Does have the big bad with Deathwing and but doesn't have that same impact. Unfortunately, I don't think that it was well equipped to really have that impact. I do think there's a lot of media that has come out that kind of supports the storyline within Cataclysm. But even with all of that in mind, the story that Cataclysm does bring is just not really going to be competitive with Wrath of Lich King. So I unfortunately don't have a counterpoint to people who are really really concerned with the storyline portion of Cataclysm. Unfortunately, it is just the case that Cataclysm wasn't equipped to provide that same level of storyline progression that Wrath of Lich King really had in it. I do think the story is okay, but I'm not really a huge story person. I don't think MMOs are really the best vehicle for providing a story. I do think that the story of Cataclysm is interesting, but WoW itself does a very poor job of telling it through the game, and it's much better told in the specific books and stuff like that came out detailing more the NPC characters within WoW and their experiences during the Cataclysm. Stuff like that is much more interesting than what your player character does in the actual game itself, in my opinion. But the other camp that I would like to kind of touch on, because this is the portion that I would be in, is people who say the gameplay of Cataclysm is bad. I don't personally feel that way. I think that the PvP was fantastic. Some of the most fun that I've had in PvP across an expansion, like across all expansions. Cataclysm has had some of the best PvP in my opinion. The PvE content, I think the raids are fairly challenging. I think class design is honestly really, really good. Spec design and focus of the specs is really, really, really good. The addition of mastery is really cool. The addition of transmog is really cool, so that you don't have the random trash bag wearing class. You don't. Appearance isn't a huge thing for me necessarily within the game, but is important to the end that I don't want to replace a piece of gear and just have my character look completely out of place, if that makes sense. So transmog is really cool. Does also encourage you to do some of the older content, so that's really interesting as well. But the big thing for me is the gameplay of the classes themselves, which I do think is very good. One of the big critiques that people have is the change from the 61-point talent tree to the 31-point talent tree. I actually personally prefer the 31-point talent trees to the 61-point talent trees. But just kind of give an example, this is the 61-point talent tree that we currently have in Wrath. It is fairly large. My general problem with the 61-point talent tree is that each talent point means very little. Yes, you do get one each level, but this is 1% crit chance. This is less than 1% even damage at all. This is a 4% chance on something that happens every 15 seconds or 10 seconds. It's not 15. It's 8 to 10 seconds. But still, each point means very little. And then when we come over to a 31-point talent tree, which this isn't exactly what the 31-point talent trees will look like for Cataclysm, but this is fairly close. Each point seems much more impactful. It's not hugely impactful, not like to the degree that Mr. Pandaria, where each talent point like directly gives you an ability or modifies an ability. But still, each point does mean more, which does mean when you like, say, for example, we're speccing into combat here, we reach this point. Actually, it's this point right here, where now you have to take a utility ability. You have to take a point into a utility talent. So you can take like a kick silence, or you can take added armor, or you can take remove movement impairing effects on your sprint. But each of these points means a lot more. Each utility point means a lot more. So while you can't like sub-spec immediately, because one of the consequences of the 31-point talent tree is that you do have to invest 31 points into the tree before you can sub-spec, it does mean that each point into like a forced utility option does mean a lot more. Which means that while it doesn't seem like you have as much choice, cookie cutter talents existed in Wrath just the same as any other expansion. And so that being the case, when we have these options of you have 2 points, 3 points before you can get to the next row, and you have to pick the utility option, I would rather personally those talents mean a lot more, so that my decision for what utility I do take actually means something, as opposed to in Wrath where even if you do reach that point where you have to invest a utility point somewhere, it hardly means anything. It does not have the same level of impact as it does in Cataclysm. Especially like you're doing like two-handed frost, for example. So like two-handed frost, this is already a utility talent, but you don't want to take nerfs cold steel because it doesn't actually matter. So you're already taking utility talents, right? And as you kind of come down the talent tree, now you have another instance of, okay, what utility do I take? Right? So you could take like On a Pale Horse, you could take Lichborn. So like these options of like what, and even when you get to the next row, actually, you'll just take 3 points here, and then you'll have another 2 points to put somewhere in utility. So there's a lot of instances where classes will have points that they want to put in the utility, and I find that really interesting. I find argument of being forced is bad, but being forced into utility and then having that decision that you're making as to where to put those utility points actually matter is really cool. Just to provide a little bit more detail on the talent trees, though, this is another really cool thing that I like. Obviously, masteries being a portion of the game now is really cool. Adding another major secondary stat is very cool as far as like itemization is concerned. Does change a lot of that. But also just as far as like leveling up is concerned, when you like choose a specialization and get an ability and get some passives, and then like you are obviously you're going to be shown like what your mastery is going to be. You don't get that until level 80, but you're at least shown what it is. All of this is really cool, especially from like a leveling perspective. I intend on probably leveling at least 1 or 2 characters during Cataclysm, just because I really enjoyed the Cata leveling experience. But this changed the talent tree where you select a specialization and then get passives and get an active ability that's reflective of what you're choosing is really, really cool to me. It's something that, in my personal opinion, is like very lacking in like in Wrath Lich King, where in Wrath Lich King talents, for example, if you want to play an assassination rogue, right, you're actually just going to be playing combat until level like 50. And then you finally get mutilate. And that's kind of, when you get mutilate, that's when you're like, okay, so now I have the new ability to press. Whereas in Cataclysm, you get that at level 10. You get the new ability to press. And while it's not like a really huge distinction, it feels at least like you're pressing a different button. So you feel special in that sense. You feel specialized, which is a nice change of pace, in my opinion, from Wrath of the Lich King and from preceding expansions. So a lot of people are under kind of like the misconception that we go all the way to Mr. Pandaria talent trees with Cataclysm. That's certainly not true. We do go to 31-point talent trees, and I do think the design of 31-point talent trees is very good. My personal opinion on Cataclysm is I will be playing it. I do think that the class and spec design of Cataclysm is honestly like a almost purely an improvement over Wrath Lich King. I do think that Cataclysm expands on what Wrath wanted to do. You can see with the progression through Wrath that we started with very basic raids, very basic class design and stuff like that. And just with like the limited stats that were available in Wrath, your class was very slow. Wasn't really clunky, but didn't really like fully feel like it fit together. And then as we got to Cold War, TOC, ICC, with the stat increases we saw, and with the increase of difficulty of encounters, clearly they wanted raids to be harder. They wanted your character to be harder to play. They wanted to require you to play your character at least to like a minimum level in order to perform. All of these things were true. So with all of that in mind, Cataclysm does all of those things, just more. Makes your class more engaging, makes fights more engaging, more personal responsibility in raids, and does like crank up the speed of the game a little bit. And I think all that is very good. And even speaking on some of the like specific class changes that come, like there's specific changes like runes and stuff like that. Obviously, hunters moving from mana to focus. All of this is just like clearly to like speed the game up, make classes feel more distinct, unique, make them feel better to play. I do think that Cataclysm largely just does succeed at doing that. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. I do also stream live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Kadalis, so do follow me over there to receive notifications when I do go live. And also don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on the video.